Mill decks are terrible right now. What if I told you guys, however, there is a way to break mill decks and make them tier 1? It's not impossible at all, and anything could really be broken with the right support and cards. Mill decks are no different, and today, whether we gracefully see where mill decks are in the now, or see the potential of them as control and combo deck strategies, I'll be exploring how mill decks could absolutely be degenerate in Yu-Gi-Oh! Before we get into this, if you guys want some of the highest quality playmats on the market, make sure you guys check out Imperium Duelist for some of the best playmats out there. They're so good you could probably sleep on these things considering how silky smooth they are. Along with buying these playmats, if you guys want a little bit of money saved on your order, use promo code BladeYGO10 at checkout for 10% off. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. With that, let's see how we can break mill decks in 2019. Okay, so where are mill decks right now? I think the most prominent and best mill deck right now is Akashi FTK. So if you guys don't know Akashi FTK or Akashi in general, Akashi is a synchro climb deck revolved around a card known as Daki, which reads you can only control one Daki the Graceful Akashi. When a Akashi monster is special summoned to your field from the extra deck while this card is in the graveyard, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck the turn you activate this effect, except Akashi monsters. So to basically break it down, you want to turbo out Daki as fast as possible, and because Daki will continuously special summon itself from the graveyard, it has no once per turn restriction on it. This just means you can keep recurring it, and then you can synchro climb further and further, basically loading up your graveyard with a ton of zombie monsters. But really, that's not what's relevant here. What's relevant is it's synchro climbing and it's continuously special summoning itself and special summoning zombie monsters. Besides the fact that pure Akashi specifically lock you into summoning Akashi monsters from the extra deck with a card like Daki, for example, the reason why these cards are good is because you are continuously special summoning, like I said. And why is that good? Well, there's a card known as Soul Absorbing Bone Tower. So Soul Absorbing Bone Tower is a pretty simple card. It reads, if you control another zombie type monster, your opponent cannot target this card for attacks. Each time a zombie type monster is special summoned, send the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. So why is this good? Well, you may have connected the dots here, but basically if you have set up to continuously synchro climb and you have a Soul Absorbing Bone Tower on the field, you are milling quite a lot of cards if you think about it. So there are 5 synchro monsters for the Akashi archetype, and if you continuously revive Daki and synchro summon, basically it will go like this. You synchro summon a Akashi monster, you use the effect of Daki, and you use the effect of Soul Absorbing Bone Tower, you mill 2, then Daki special summons itself, and Soul Absorbing Bone Tower will mill 2 more, and from there you keep synchro summoning over and over again until you can mill your opponent's entire deck. If they're playing 60 cards, it becomes a lot harder to achieve this goal, but honestly, if you can achieve this goal, it's really good. Now, there are issues with this. First off, you need to get Soul Absorbing Bone Tower on the field as fast as possible, because without Soul Absorbing Bone Tower, the FTK is completely dead. You need access to the Akashi engine as well, and honestly, it's not enough if you just synchros climb one time thoroughly through the entire play, because think about it, Daki plus a synchro summon equals 4 cards milled. So every time you synchro summon, you're milling 4 cards from your opponent's deck, and from there you have to basically climb the ladder again. Now they do have a link monster making this easier, making it 24 cards every time you go through a full cycle, or I guess 26 if you summon the Daki back, but that's not enough to mill 40 cards, and once we get to the idea of playing 60 cards in our decks to counter these mill strategies, then it becomes a lot more difficult for Akashi FTK to work. The deck is honestly inconsistent though, because you have to have Soul Absorbing Bone Tower, you need to have the synchro climb initial play, but because that's only milling 26 cards, you need one more level 1 monster to thoroughly go through your opponent's entire deck. If you can go a full cycle twice, you're milling 52 cards, which means you have the FTK on lock. Again, that's not 60 cards, so if your opponent does play a 60 card deck, well then Akashi FTK can't work, because it just cannot special summon enough monsters in order to achieve your win condition. So yeah, that's around 3 to 4 cards you will need, because you also need to be special summoning your entire combo, because you need your normal summon to be the soul absorbing bone tower, or you need a special summon from your hand in some way. And honestly, there are ways to stop this combo as well. If your opponent just draws an effect veiler and uses it on soul absorbing bone tower, then you just kind of lose the match outright if you don't have a way to resurrect the soul absorbing bone tower or somehow put it back on the field with its effect. So this is where mill decks are at as of now. Mill decks honestly aren't that great. This is probably the most prominent mill deck in the game as of right now, just because it's an FTK, but that's not arguing for it being good. It's just the best mill deck we have. So how do we make it degenerate? Well, let's think about it for a second. Our goal is to mill our opponent's entire deck in an FTK route of making mill decks degenerate. So in that scenario, this can be done in 2 different ways. One, we can use an infinite loop to our advantage. So remember Firewall FTK? Yeah, and how we can infinitely abuse Cannon Soldier? Yeah, it was pretty good. Well, there are plenty of possibilities for us to be able to FTK in this type of sense. What if we had a Worm FTK? Yes, you heard me, a Worm FTK. The idea is you have an insect monster that can constantly revive a Worm during your end phase. And when Worm is destroyed, it will mill 3 cards from the top of your opponent's deck. Now, how do we destroy Worm constantly? If we're reviving it constantly, now we just need a way to destroy it. And the best way of destroying it is Topologic Bomber Dragon. So the idea is you constantly summon back the Worm after it gets destroyed during the end phase. Summoning it to his own Topologic Bomber Dragon points to Bomber Dragon can destroy the Worm, milling 3 more, you revive it, destroy, mill 3, revive, destroy and mill 3, etc. Making this combo actually work if you can somehow keep constantly reviving it. Now the issue is with this type of combo, an effect veiler does also end the combo. So you would need to make it consistent somehow and give your monsters some sort of protection or whatnot in order to prevent this combo from just fizzling. So that's basically one way we can actually achieve a mill FTK. Just by having an infinite loop for a card like Worm, for example, to constantly revive itself and, well, win the game from there. So we could have something like a non-once per turn milling clause. Remember, Soul Absorbing Bone Tower is a method of FTKing your opponent if we just had enough summons to do so. While 60 card decks, again, can counter this strategy pretty well, it's basically a matter of if they play 60 cards, we need the capability to mill 60 cards out of our opponent's deck. My Akashi FTK can't actually do that, making 60 card decks an actual counter to my Akashi FTK. One other thing I think is important to note is, think about it this way: if they actually have only 1 card left in deck, they have nothing to search from their deck, nothing to special summon from their deck, they have their graveyard as a resource, but if they can't access their deck at all because there's no cards in it, then, well, they're just kind of screwed. Imagine you're playing against Sky Striker. You may think, oh, well, if I have 1 card in deck, I'm fine. Your engage becomes dead because you can't search anything and you can't draw anything, not giving you enough advantage to win the game outright. There's so many different reasons why milling is really prominent and actually very powerful. If they don't have the main deck resources, they can't do anything, and I think that's one big advantage of having a mill deck as an FTK. So even if you mill 52 cards against a warrior dot deck, they only have 7 cards left in their deck to resource from, because they draw 1, making it 7 cards. Another way of looking at mill decks is as a control strategy. So let's think about it in this sense. Let's say a mill deck was supposed to banish cards from the opponent's deck face down, and that's basically how you win. You keep banishing cards from the top of your opponent's deck face down and keep gaining value. You basically stall out until you can mill out your opponent's deck by banishing them face down, and then you just win outright. This type of strategy could actually be really good, because if we're playing against a deck like Orcus, let's take Orcus for example, they have cards like the Orcus Field Spell, Orcus Babble, Symbol Skeleton, etc. that all lose if they somehow get dealt with. Like, let's say for example your Symbol Skeleton, which is a 1-of, gets banished face down. In this case, you just kinda lose. You need your Symbol Skeleton to be able to play the deck. With this in mind, this actually can be very devastating for a lot of combo decks, and if you're playing a control strategy that can stall out and banish cards in time, even if you don't don't hit Symbol Skeleton, you can hit other cards like, again, Orcus Babel, etc. So it's just really prominent in dealing with one-ofs. And against the Mirror Mage, you just keep banishing their resources. It's not really that hard for an idea like this to work. While this wouldn't be necessarily degenerate, which takes away from the idea of this video, I think it's still important to point this out. But I think it's important to point out the power of banishing cards face down as well. Let's take cards like True King Lithosagem and Pot of Desires as examples. Lithosagem is banned, and if you guys want to see a video on why Lithosagem is banned, comment down below saying you want it. However, Lithosagem is an amazing card, and being able to look at your opponent's extra deck and banishing 3 cards face down is honestly really incredible. Pot of Desires is an interesting card as well, because it rewards you for banishing 10 cards face down. But if your opponent's playing Pot of Desires and this type of deck is in the format, it just punishes them because it means you can mill their deck out quicker. Mill decks seem like a joke, and right now honestly they are, but hopefully this video has made you aware that mill decks have huge potential, whether as a control deck, an FTK deck, or whatever else the case may be. With this in mind, however, that's how mill decks could be degenerate in Yu-Gi-Oh! Thanks for watching.